A little boy looks up at a wealthy stranger in a diner and says, "Mom told me you're my dad." The millionaire freezes, unsure what to believe. But as questions pile up and the truth unravels, their lives will change in ways no one could predict. Is the boy telling the truth, and what secrets lie behind this bold claim? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Joe's diner, casting warm patches of light across the worn linoleum floor. Lisa Harrington moved between tables with practiced ease, her auburn hair tucked behind her ears, her green apron spotted with tiny coffee stains from a long morning of refills. The breakfast rush was finally slowing down, but her feet already ached in her sensible shoes. She balanced 3 plates along her arm while carrying a fresh pot of coffee, checking on her regulars with a tired but genuine smile. "More coffee, Mr. Peterson?" she asked, topping off an elderly man's cup. The diner hummed with the usual morning chatter, the clink of silverware, and the sizzle of bacon from the kitchen. Near the counter, her son Evan sat at his usual spot, swinging his legs as he colored in his dinosaur coloring book. His small fingers gripped the blue crayon with determination, his tongue poking out slightly as he concentrated on staying within the lines. Lisa glanced at him fondly between orders, grateful that Mrs. Jenkins from the gift shop next door always kept an eye on him during the busy moments. The bell above the door chimed, and Lisa looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit enter. He moved with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention, his dark hair perfectly styled, his leather briefcase probably worth more than her monthly rent. Something about him made her heart skip a beat, and the coffee pot suddenly felt heavier in her hand. Lisa watched as Adam took a seat at the counter, just 2 spots away from Evan. Her son looked up from his coloring book, his blue eyes widening with curiosity at the newcomer. Lisa wanted to call out, to stop what she knew was about to happen, but her voice caught in her throat. Evan slid off his stool, his small feet padding across the floor. Before Lisa could move, he reached up and tugged on Adam's sleeve. The man looked down, his gray eyes meeting Evan's innocent gaze. "Mom said you're my dad," Evan announced with the straightforward honesty only a child could muster. The words hung in the air like suspended crystal, fragile and sharp. Adam's polite smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "You must be mistaken, kid. Your dad's probably around here somewhere." Evan's small face scrunched up with determination. "No, my mom said you are my dad." His voice carried across the diner, louder this time, filled with the absolute certainty of a child who knew he was right. The usual breakfast chatter died away. Forks stopped mid-bite, conversations trailed off, and all eyes turned toward the counter. In the sudden silence, Lisa could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. The coffee pot slipped from her trembling fingers. It seemed to fall in slow motion, end over end, before shattering on the floor with a crash that made everyone jump. Dark coffee spread across the linoleum like a stain of secrets finally spilled. Adam's face had gone pale, his practiced composure cracking as he stared at Evan's familiar features that mirrored his sister Sarah's, and in some ways, his own. His hands gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. "I'm sorry," he muttered, pushing back from the counter. "I need to go." He grabbed his briefcase, nearly knocking over his untouched water glass in his haste. The bell chimed again as he rushed out, leaving a wake of whispers behind him. Through the large front window, Lisa watched him climb into his sleek black BMW. As he pulled away from the curb, she could see his troubled expression in the rearview mirror. In the car, Adam's hands clenched the steering wheel as Evan's words echoed in his mind. Mom said you are my dad." Each repetition sent a new wave of unease through him, unsettling him more than he wanted to acknowledge. Adam's footsteps echoed through his penthouse as he made his way to the bar. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights twinkling like fallen stars against the darkening sky. He reached for the crystal decanter, his hand slightly unsteady as he poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. The leather chair by the window creaked softly as he sank into it. The amber liquid in his glass caught the last rays of sunset, but Adam barely noticed the play of light. His mind kept returning to the small diner and the little boy with those haunting blue eyes. "It's absurd," he muttered, taking a sip of whiskey. The familiar burn did nothing to quiet his racing thoughts. The kid must have confused me with someone else. But even as he tried to dismiss it, doubt crept in like a shadow. Evan's face floated in his memory, those earnest eyes, the determined set of his small jaw, and something else. Something that made Adam's chest tighten uncomfortably. The boy's features held an echo of someone he'd known long ago. Adam set his glass down harder than necessary, causing the ice cubes to clink. He loosened his tie and ran a hand through his dark hair. The city stretched out before him, but instead of its usual comforting familiarity, it felt overwhelming tonight. Each glittering window seemed to mock his attempts at rationalization. Those eyes, they weren't just any blue eyes. They were startlingly similar to his own mother's eyes, a distinctive shade that ran in the Carlyle family. And Lisa's reaction? Adam's fingers tightened around the glass as he remembered. She hadn't looked confused or apologetic about her son's outburst. Instead, her face had drained of color, pure panic flashing across her features before she dropped that coffee pot. "Think," he commanded himself, closing his eyes. Had he met Lisa before? The name didn't ring any bells, but something about her seemed vaguely familiar, like a word stuck on the tip of his tongue. The whiskey sat forgotten as Adam pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Jack Monroe had been his go-to investigator for years, handling everything from business background checks to more personal matters with quiet efficiency. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Monroe." "Jack, it's Adam Carlyle." "Mr. Carlyle, bit late for a business call." Adam could picture Jack in his cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets and computer screens, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of a desk lamp. "This isn't about business. I need you to look into someone, a waitress named Lisa Harrington and her son Evan." There was a pause, followed by the sound of papers shuffling. "Any particular reason?" Adam stared at his reflection in the window, noting the tension in his jaw. "I need answers, Jack. The boy, he made some claims today. I need to know if there's any truth to them." "I'll start first thing tomorrow," Jack replied, his voice careful and professional. "Anything specific you want me to focus on?" "Everything," Adam said firmly. "Their background, their connections, and—" He hesitated for a moment. "Any possible connection to me. Leave no stone unturned." "Understood. I'll be in touch when I have something solid." The call ended, and Adam turned back to the city view. The knot in his stomach hadn't loosened, but at least he was doing something. Whatever truth lay behind Evan's words, he would find it. Lisa's hands trembled as she folded napkins in the diner's break room, the white squares blurring before her eyes. The rhythmic motion that usually calmed her nerves only heightened her anxiety today. Her son's words to Adam Carlyle kept echoing in her head. "Mom said you're my dad." She dropped a napkin and pressed her hands against the break room's metal table to steady herself. The cool surface grounded her, but her heart continued to race. 6 years of carefully constructed answers and gentle deflections had crumbled in a matter of seconds. "What was I thinking?" she whispered to herself. The break room's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Lisa resumed folding napkins. Her son's questions about his father had been growing more frequent lately. "Why don't I have a daddy?" he'd ask. "Where did he go?" Each question had felt like a tiny knife in her heart. Hours later, after the last customer had left and she'd wiped down the final table, Lisa heard the bell above the door chime. She turned to say they were closed, but the words died in her throat. Adam Carlyle stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the darkness outside. His expression was stern, determined. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm but controlled. Lisa's hand tightened around the cleaning rag she held. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Come in," she managed to say, gesturing toward a nearby booth. Adam walked in, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood by the booth, his gray eyes fixed on her. "Your son," he said without preamble. "Why does he think I'm his dad?" Lisa set down the cleaning rag and met his gaze. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. "Because," she paused, gathering her courage. "Because he might be?" Adam's eyebrows furrowed. "What do you mean, might be?" "I'm Sarah's sister," Lisa said, watching as recognition flickered across his face. "She was going to tell you, but you left before she could. She didn't think you'd want to know." Lisa's voice trembled slightly. "She didn't want Evan to grow up unwanted." Adam's composed facade cracked. He gripped the back of the booth, his knuckles white. "If there's even a chance he's mine, I deserve to know. I need the truth," he demanded, his voice tight with emotion. Lisa straightened her shoulders, meeting his intense gaze. "I'll let you meet with Evan again," she said, her voice growing stronger. "But I want to be clear about something." She took a step closer to him, her protective instincts flaring. "This isn't about you. It's about Evan, and I won't let you hurt him." Adam stood rigid by the diner's counter, his fingers drumming against the worn surface, leaving faint marks in the accumulated dust. The empty restaurant felt too small for the weight of their conversation, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across their faces. "I need proof, Lisa. Documents, medical records, anything that shows I'm Evan's father." Lisa's eyes flashed with hurt and anger, her waitress uniform suddenly feeling like armor in this confrontation. "Proof? Sarah was carrying your child and you want paperwork?" Her voice cracked slightly, heavy with years of buried resentment. "You walked away from her, and now you want evidence?" "I didn't walk away." Adam's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching visibly. "Sarah disappeared. One day she was there. The next." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, frustration evident in every movement, his corporate polish cracking under the strain. "I searched for her, but she was gone." "Because she was scared," Lisa shot back, her hands gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. "Your family, their threats, the pressure they put on her, it was too much. She'd come home crying most nights." "My family?" Adam's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, his normally composed features twisting with shock. "What are you talking about?" "Don't pretend you didn't know." Lisa's voice was bitter now, laden with memories of consoling her sister through sleepless nights. "Sarah told me everything. How your parents thought she wasn't good enough for their precious heir. How they made it clear she needed to stay away. How they'd destroy her if she didn't." Adam's face paled, the color draining from his cheeks. "I never knew about any threats. Sarah never said." "Of course she didn't tell you." Lisa's eyes welled with tears, though she fought to keep them from falling. She loved you too much to put you in that position. She thought she was protecting you, protecting your relationship with your family. She couldn't bear to make you choose. The mention of Sarah's love hit Adam like a physical blow, making him step back slightly. He remembered her smile, her laugh, the way she'd look at him like he was her whole world. The memory of her death still felt raw, even after all these years, like a wound that refused to heal properly. If what you're saying is true, Adam's voice was controlled but strained, like a wire about to snap. If Evan is really my son, I have a right to know. Sarah may have had her reasons, but keeping this from me wasn't fair. Fair? Lisa laughed without humor, the sound echoing hollowly in the empty diner. Was it fair when Sarah died alone? When Evan had to grow up without a father? When I had to explain to a 4-year-old why other kids had daddies and he didn't? Life isn't fair, Adam. We just do our best to protect the ones we love. Adam took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure, though his perfectly pressed suit felt suffocating now. I'm not leaving this alone, Lisa. I can't. Not now that I know. What are you going to do? Lisa's voice held a note of challenge, tinged with fear. Whatever it takes to find out the truth. Adam pulled out his phone, already dialing Jack's number, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. I'm having my investigator look into everything. Sarah's records, Evan's birth certificate, any connection between us. Lisa's face hardened, her features settling into a mask of determination. You really haven't changed, have you? Still trying to control everything with money and power, just like your family. This isn't about control. Adam's voice rose slightly, echoing off the chrome fixtures. This is about my son, if he is my son. Don't you think I deserve to know the truth? They stared at each other across the counter, years of unspoken words and buried grief hanging between them like a heavy curtain. Finally, Adam turned toward the door, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. I'll find out what happened, Lisa. All of it. About Sarah, about my parents, about Evan. You can't stop me from discovering the truth. He walked out into the night, the bell above the door chiming softly behind him, leaving Lisa alone in the empty diner. The silence felt deafening. Once in his car, he called Jack, the leather seats creaking as he settled in. I need you to dig deeper, he told the investigator, his voice tight with determination. Focus on Sarah Parker, her history, her death, everything. And I want to know if there's any paper trail connecting her and Evan to me. Leave no stone unturned. I'll get right on it, Jack replied, already sensing the urgency in his client's tone. Adam ended the call, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly enough to leave impressions in the leather. The truth was out there, buried in the past, and he was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. The weight of possibility, of fatherhood, pressed down on him like a physical force as he sat there in the dark parking lot, the diner's neon sign casting a ghostly glow through his windshield. Adam sat in his dimly lit study, a forgotten glass of whiskey on his mahogany desk, his eyes fixed on an old photograph hidden in his drawer. Sarah's bright smile captured in a moment of pure joy, her head thrown back in laughter at some forgotten joke. The memories he'd pushed away for years came rushing back like a flood, overwhelming his carefully maintained composure. He remembered their first meeting at that charity gala, the crystal chandeliers casting soft shadows across the marble floors. Sarah had been working as a photographer, her camera hanging around her neck as she captured candid moments of the wealthy elite, her artistic eye finding beauty in the smallest details. She'd caught him smiling, a rare sight, and teased him about it, her own eyes twinkling with mischief. You should do that more often, she'd said, showing him the photo on her camera screen, her finger tapping the display. Smile, I mean. It makes you look human." The memory of her directness, so different from the calculated politeness he was used to, made his chest ache with a familiar hollow pain. Sarah had been like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, warm, unexpected, and impossible to ignore, bringing light to his structured world. Their whirlwind romance had been filled with contradictions and passionate debates. Late-night conversations in his penthouse, her bare feet propped on his expensive coffee table as she challenged his views on everything from politics to the meaning of happiness. Arguments about his endless work hours would erupt frequently, her voice rising with frustration as she paced his living room. "There's more to life than quarterly reports, Adam. When was the last time you watched a sunset?" He remembered their last night together with painful clarity, every detail etched into his mind like a bitter photograph. They'd had dinner at her favorite small Italian restaurant, the one with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles where the owner knew them by name. Sarah had seemed distracted, playing with her pasta instead of eating it, her fork pushing the noodles around aimlessly. "I need to tell you something," she'd said, her voice unusually serious, fingers nervously twisting her napkin. But his phone had buzzed, another urgent work matter, and he'd held up his hand to silence her, not seeing how her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Can it wait?" he'd asked, already typing a response to his email, his attention divided. "This merger is crucial, and I need to handle this now." The hurt in her eyes should have warned him, should have made him put down the phone immediately. But he'd been too absorbed in his work, too convinced that everything else could wait, too blind to see what really mattered. When he'd finally looked up from his phone, she was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her perfume. The waiter said she'd paid the bill and left, her hands shaking as she signed the receipt. Adam's hand trembled as he set down the photograph, his fingers ghosting over her face. That was the last time he'd seen her alive. Months later, when he'd finally tracked her down, desperate to apologize, he'd learned of her death, a car accident that had left too many questions unanswered and a void that could never be filled. Now, sitting in his study, the weight of his choices pressed down on him like a physical burden, making even breathing feel like an effort. He'd prioritized everything else over Sarah, his work, his family's expectations, his carefully constructed image. And what did he have to show for it? A successful business empire built on lonely nights and missed opportunities, awards that gathered dust on empty shelves. Looking at Evan's bright blue eyes in his mind, Sarah's eyes with that same spark of life, Adam felt a deep, gnawing guilt that threatened to consume him. He'd failed Sarah, wrapped up in his own importance, deaf to whatever she'd been trying to tell him that night. And now, years later, her son, possibly his son, had appeared like a ghost from his past, forcing him to confront his mistakes and the man he'd become. Maybe this was his chance to make things right, not just with Evan, but with Sarah's memory. The thought terrified him. He'd spent years building walls around his emotions, protecting himself from exactly this kind of vulnerability, hiding behind spreadsheets and meetings. But as he stared at Sarah's smiling face in the photograph, her joy forever frozen in time, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. He owed her that much, at least. Evan sat at their small kitchen table, his legs swinging beneath his chair as he pushed his mac and cheese around his plate, making little orange mountains with his fork. His bright blue eyes kept darting to Lisa, who was trying to keep her hands steady as she washed the dishes, the gentle clink of plates barely masking her nervous energy. "Mom?" His small voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "Why did Mr. Carlyle look so scared today?" Lisa's hand stilled under the running water, soap bubbles sliding down her wrists. She turned off the tap and dried her hands on a worn dish towel, buying time to find the right words. How could she explain something so complicated to a 6-year-old when she could barely make sense of it herself? "Sometimes, honey," she began, sitting down next to him and smoothing a wrinkle in the checkered tablecloth. "Grown-ups need time to think about big news. It's like when you found out we were moving to a new apartment last year. Remember how that felt?" Evan nodded slowly, his fork finally coming to rest. "I was excited, but also scared." "That's right. Well, Mr. Carlisle got some really big news today, and he needs time to think about it, just like you did." "But I told him he's my dad," Evan said, his forehead wrinkling in confusion, blue eyes wide with innocence. "Isn't that happy news?" Lisa's heart squeezed in her chest, a familiar ache she'd carried for years. She reached out and smoothed his curly hair, so much like Sarah's had been. It can be happy news and still be scary at the same time. Sometimes the biggest, most important things in life are like that. Evan seemed to consider this, taking a thoughtful bite of his dinner. "Like when I started first grade." "Exactly like that," Lisa said, grateful for his simple wisdom that often made the most complicated things clear. After dinner, Evan settled at his little art table in the corner of their living room, his special place where imagination came to life. It was his favorite spot, covered in crayon marks and stickers from countless afternoons of creativity. Lisa watched him from the kitchen as she packed tomorrow's lunches, noticing how his tongue stuck out slightly as he concentrated on his drawing, just like Sarah used to do when she was focused on something. The apartment grew quiet, except for the soft scratching of crayons on paper and the steady hum of their old refrigerator, a comfortable rhythm that usually calmed her nerves. Lisa lost herself in thought, wondering what Adam might be doing right now. Was he as confused and overwhelmed as she was? Was he sitting in his expensive office, trying to make sense of how his carefully ordered world had suddenly shifted? "All done," Evan announced proudly, pulling Lisa from her worries. He carefully placed his drawing on the kitchen counter before running off to get ready for bed, his sock-covered feet padding against the worn linoleum. Lisa walked over to look at his artwork, and her breath caught in her throat. There, drawn in bright crayon colors, was a picture of 3 people holding hands. One was clearly Evan, with yellow scribbles for hair. Next to him stood a tall figure in what looked like a suit. Adam, she realized. The third figure had long red hair that could only be her. The 3 figures smiled with wide crayon grins under a bright yellow sun. Above the drawing, in wobbly letters, Evan had written, "My family," with backwards E's, each letter carefully formed despite their imperfections. Lisa's vision blurred with tears. She touched the paper gently, tracing the stick figures with her fingertip, feeling the waxy texture of the crayon beneath her touch. The simple hope in those crayon lines broke her heart. This was exactly what she'd tried to protect him from, the dream of a perfect family that might never come true. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she thought about Sarah, about Adam, about all the choices that had led to this moment. The picture represented everything Evan wanted, everything she wished she could give him. But life wasn't as simple as a child's drawing. Adam wasn't just a stick figure in a suit. He was a complicated man with his own life, his own problems, his own reasons for being who he was. "Mom," Evan called from the bathroom, his voice echoing slightly. "Can you help me reach my toothbrush?" Lisa quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, composing herself. "Coming, sweetie," she called back, her voice only slightly shaky. She took one last look at the drawing before heading to help her son, leaving the paper where it lay on the counter, a crayon dream of what might be, illuminated by the soft kitchen light. Jack Monroe's office was a stark contrast to Adam's polished penthouse. Papers cluttered the worn desk, and Venetian blinds cast striped shadows across the room. The private investigator leaned back in his creaking chair, his weathered face serious as he opened a manila folder. "I've got some information you need to hear," Jack said, his voice grave. "It's about Sarah Parker's death." Adam's shoulders tensed. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. "What about it?" "Official report says she died in a car accident 6 years ago. Single vehicle crash, late at night." Jack pulled out some photographs, laying them carefully on the desk. "But something doesn't add up. The brake lines were damaged, but the investigating officer ruled it accidental without much investigation." Adam picked up one of the photos, his hand trembling slightly. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying there are questions that were never answered." Jack shuffled through more papers. "But there's more. Lisa Harrington, Sarah's sister, has been raising Evan alone since Sarah died. She's working 2 jobs, the diner during the day and cleaning offices at night. They live in a small apartment on Cedar Street. Behind on rent 3 times in the past year." Adam's throat felt tight. "Why didn't she ever reach out?" "From what I've gathered, Sarah was scared of something or someone before she died. Lisa's been keeping a low profile ever since." Jack leaned forward, his expression softening. "Look, Adam, this isn't just about proving paternity. You're dealing with people's lives here. That boy has grown up without a father, and Lisa's done everything she can to protect him." "I need to know if he's mine," Adam insisted. "DNA can tell you that," Jack said, closing the folder. "But being a father? That's about more than genetics. Lisa's struggling, yes, but she's given that boy a good life. She's fierce when it comes to protecting him." He paused, studying Adam's face. "Whatever you decide to do next, handle it carefully. You could either heal some old wounds or create new ones." Adam stood by the window, watching traffic crawl through the streets below. The weight of Jack's words pressed down on his shoulders. After a long moment, he turned back to face the investigator. "Set up a meeting," he said quietly. "Somewhere neutral. I'll talk to Lisa and meet Evan properly this time." Jack nodded approvingly. "I'll make the arrangements. Just remember, that boy's heart is on the line. Whatever happened in the past, whatever happens next, he's the one who matters most in all of this." Adam invites Lisa and Evan to a formal meeting at his office. The elevator doors opened onto the 40th floor of the Carlyle building, and Evan's eyes grew wide as saucers. The 6-year-old clutched Lisa's hand tightly as they stepped into a world of gleaming marble and floor-to-ceiling windows, the morning sun casting long shadows across the polished floors. "Mom, look! You can see the whole world from here." Evan pressed his face against the glass, his breath fogging the pristine surface. His small fingers traced invisible patterns on the window as he pointed out tiny cars and people moving like ants on the streets below. Lisa smoothed her simple dress, feeling out of place among the expensive furnishings and designer artwork that adorned the walls. "Careful, honey. Don't leave fingerprints." She pulled a tissue from her purse and quickly wiped away the smudges. Adam's assistant, a young woman in a crisp charcoal suit, approached them with a warm smile, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "Mr. Carlyle is ready to see you now." She gestured toward the massive double doors at the end of the hallway. Adam's office was bigger than their entire apartment, with modern furniture that probably cost more than Lisa made in a year. Evan couldn't contain his excitement as he bounced from one corner to another, examining everything with unrestrained curiosity. He ran his fingers along the leather sofa and peered at the abstract paintings with wondering eyes. "Do you own this whole building?" Evan asked, peering at a model skyscraper on Adam's imposing mahogany desk. His small fingers hovered over the miniature structure, itching to touch it. Adam cleared his throat, caught off guard by the direct question. His usual composure wavered slightly at the child's forthright manner. "Well, yes, the company does." So you're like a millionaire? Evan's blue eyes sparkled with innocent wonder, his face lighting up with pure childhood fascination. Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her cheeks flushing pink. Evan, honey, that's not polite to ask. She shot an apologetic glance at Adam, but Adam found himself smiling despite his usual reserved demeanor, surprised by how much he enjoyed the boy's candor. It's all right. Yes, Evan, I am. Cool, Evan exclaimed, practically bouncing on his toes. Do you have a swimming pool? And a helicopter? Jimmy at school says rich people have helicopters. His words tumbled out in an excited rush. Evan, Lisa warned gently, but Adam held up a hand, his expression softening. I have a pool at my penthouse, he admitted, watching the boy's face light up like a Christmas tree. But no helicopter. Not yet, anyway. The playful tone in his voice surprised even him. As they discussed the logistics of the DNA test, Adam found his attention repeatedly drawn to Evan. The boy's mannerisms, the way he scrunched his nose when thinking, the slight tilt of his head when something caught his interest, it all felt strangely familiar, like looking at an old photograph. When Evan discovered the remote control for the window blinds, his delighted giggles filled the usually austere office, bringing an unexpected warmth to the space. I'll have my doctor conduct the test tomorrow, Adam said, his voice softer than usual, gentler than his typical business tone. We should have results within a week. Lisa nodded, gathering her purse and standing up. Come on, Evan, we should let Mr. Carlyle get back to work. She straightened her dress again, a nervous habit. Can't we stay longer? Evan pleaded, his lower lip jutting out slightly. I want to see more of the building. Something tugged at Adam's heart, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Maybe another time, he found himself saying. If your mom agrees. The words came naturally, surprising him with their sincerity. After they left, Adam stood at the window, watching as Lisa and Evan emerged from the building far below. The boy skipped along the sidewalk, still full of energy, occasionally pulling his mother to look at something in a store window. Without meaning to, Adam found himself hoping the test would be positive, the thought warming him from within. The thought startled him. He'd spent days convinced he wanted the test purely to know the truth, to fulfill any legal obligations. But watching Evan's uninhibited joy, hearing his curious questions, Adam realized something had shifted inside him. Whether or not the DNA matched, he felt an unexpected urge to protect this bright-eyed boy who had burst into his life with such innocent certainty, bringing chaos to his orderly world in the most delightful way. Adam picked up his phone to call the doctor, his hand steady despite the weight of the decision. The test would provide answers, but he knew now that the results wouldn't change the strange protectiveness he already felt toward Evan. The boy had somehow managed to crack his carefully constructed walls in just one meeting, leaving him both unsettled and oddly hopeful about what the future might hold. Lisa's hands trembled as she held the manila envelope from the medical lab. She sat at her small kitchen table, the morning sun casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The coffee in her mug had gone cold, forgotten in the anxiety of the moment. A stack of unpaid bills sat nearby, a constant reminder of her struggles as a single mother. She took a deep breath and carefully opened the envelope, pulling out the crisp white papers inside. Her eyes scanned the medical jargon until they landed on the crucial line. Probability of paternity, 99%. The black letters seemed to pulse on the stark white paper, making her dizzy. The confirmation hit her like a physical force. She set the papers down and pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears. Through the thin walls of their apartment, she could hear Evan getting ready for school, humming a cheerful tune as he packed his backpack. The sound of his innocent happiness made her heart ache. "Mom," Evan called out, "have you seen my space sticker book?" His voice carried the same enthusiasm he had for everything in life. "Check under your bed, sweetie," Lisa replied, quickly wiping her eyes and tucking the test results back into the envelope. She glanced at the clock, 7:45 a.m. Adam would be in his office by now, probably already deep into his morning meetings and business calls. After dropping Evan at school, watching him bounce up the steps with his oversized backpack, Lisa sat in her car in the parking lot, staring at her phone. Her finger hovered over Adam's number for several long moments before she finally pressed dial. Her heart pounded with each ring. "Adam Carlisle speaking." His voice was crisp and professional, the voice of a man who commanded respect in every situation. "Adam, it's Lisa." She clutched the steering wheel with her free hand until her knuckles turned white. "The results came in this morning." There was a pause on the other end. "And the test confirms it. You're Evan's father. The probability is over 99%. She could hear her own pulse in her ears as she waited for his response. The silence that followed felt endless. When Adam finally spoke, his voice was controlled, almost mechanical. "I see. I'll have my lawyers review the documentation and be in touch about next steps." "Next steps?" Lisa's voice cracked slightly. "Adam, this isn't just some business transaction. This is about our son." She fought to keep the frustration from her voice. "I understand that," he replied coldly. "But we need to handle this properly, legally." "Of course," Lisa said quietly, disappointment heavy in her voice. "I'll send you a copy of the results." She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back fresh tears. "Thank you. I have a meeting to attend." The line went dead before Lisa could respond, leaving her alone with the hollow sound of the dial tone. Back in his office, Adam set his phone down carefully on his desk. He stared out at the city skyline, his reflection ghostly in the tinted glass. The words echoed in his mind. 99%. Evan was his son. His son. The magnitude of this truth made his carefully ordered world tilt on its axis. His hand reached for his tie, suddenly feeling too tight around his throat. The weight of the truth pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. All those years, while he'd been building his empire, his child had been growing up without him. Sarah's child. Their child. The thought of Sarah sent a familiar pang through his chest. The intercom buzzed, his assistant's voice cutting through his thoughts. "Mr. Carlisle, your 9 o'clock is waiting." Adam reached for the intercom button, but his hand stopped midway. For the first time in his career, business wasn't the most important thing on his mind. The familiar sanctuary of his corner office suddenly felt like a prison of his own making. Jack Monroe sat in his dimly lit office, surrounded by stacks of papers and old case files. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the Venetian blinds, creating stripes across his weathered face. He picked up his phone and dialed Adam's number. "Mr. Carlisle," Jack's voice was grave, "I've found something you need to see." Adam, sitting behind his mahogany desk, straightened in his chair. "What is it?" "I've been digging into Sarah's financial records from the months before her death," Jack explained, shuffling through papers. "There were several large deposits made to her account, all from untraceable sources. The biggest one came just 3 days before the accident." Adam's grip tightened on his phone. "How much?" $50,000, Jack replied. "But that's not all. Sarah had hired a private investigator herself. Guy named Marcus Wells. He was paid substantial amounts in the weeks leading up to her death." The revelation hit Adam like a punch to the gut. He remembered Sarah trying to tell him something important that last night. He had brushed her off, too focused on an upcoming merger. The timing can't be coincidental, Jack continued. These payments, the PI, and then suddenly, an accident. Adam closed his eyes, memories flooding back. Sarah had seemed anxious in those final weeks, looking over her shoulder more often. She had tried to warn him about something regarding his family's business practices, but he had dismissed her concerns as paranoia. "There's more," Jack's voice cut through Adam's thoughts. "Wells, the PI she hired? He disappeared right after Sarah's death. Left town without a trace. His office was cleaned out overnight." Adam stood up, walking to his office window. The city sprawled below him, but all he could see was Sarah's face the last time he saw her, worried, pleading with him to listen. "I was such a fool," Adam said quietly. "She tried to tell me something was wrong. I didn't want to hear it." "Mr. Carlyle," Jack's tone was careful, "given what we're finding, there's a possibility Sarah's death wasn't an accident." The words hung heavy in the air. Adam's free hand clenched into a fist. His family's influence ran deep in this city, and he had always known they would do anything to protect their interests. But this? "Jack," Adam's voice was steel, "we're not stopping until we know everything. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. I need to know what happened to Sarah. Even if it leads back to your family?" "Especially then," Adam replied. "I owe it to Sarah and to Evan." The autumn wind rustled through the cemetery's maple trees, scattering golden leaves across the well-maintained grounds. Adam stood before Sarah's modest headstone, his expensive coat flapping in the breeze. The granite marker seemed too simple, too plain to represent the vibrant woman he had known. Even the carved flowers adorning its corners felt inadequate compared to her vivacious spirit. "I should have listened," he whispered, placing a bouquet of white roses at the base of the stone. Their pristine petals trembled in the wind, a stark contrast to the weathered granite. His mind drifted back to that summer evening 6 years ago, when his mother had cornered him in his father's study, the room's heavy curtains drawn against the fading daylight. "She's beneath you, Adam," his mother had said, her voice dripping with disdain. "A waitress? What will our associates think?" She had paced the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like an impatient metronome. "The Carlyle name means something in this city. We've worked too hard to maintain our position." Adam's father had remained seated behind his massive mahogany desk, silent but radiating disapproval. His stern face had been partially hidden in shadow, but his judgment had been clear. The pressure had been relentless. Subtle threats about his position in the company, reminders of his responsibilities to the family legacy, carefully worded suggestions about his future inheritance. Looking at Sarah's grave now, Adam's hands clenched into fists so tight his manicured nails bit into his palms. He remembered how Sarah had tried to tell him something important that last night, her blonde hair falling around her face as she leaned forward earnestly. Her voice had been urgent, her eyes filled with worry. But he had been distracted. Consumed by work and family obligations, his phone buzzing constantly with messages he couldn't ignore. "I was a coward," he said aloud, his voice thick with emotion. "I let them push me away from you. I chose the easy path." The wind picked up, sending a chill down his spine. A nearby tree branch creaked ominously, its shadows dancing across Sarah's name etched in stone. He thought about Evan, their son, and how Sarah must have felt, carrying that secret alone. The boy's innocent face and familiar blue eyes haunted him now, a mirror of Sarah's own gaze. Sarah had died thinking he wouldn't want their child, and that thought twisted like a knife in his chest, sharp and unrelenting. Adam knelt down, brushing leaves from the base of the headstone. His fingers trembled slightly as he cleared away the debris. The dates carved there seemed to mock him, She had been so young, with so much life ahead of her. Just 28 when she died. The official report had called it an accident, but Jack's investigation painted a different picture, one filled with suspicious circumstances and convenient coincidences. "Someone wanted you quiet," he murmured, tracing the letters of her name with his finger. "They paid you off, but you hired your own investigator. You were trying to protect something, or someone." He thought of Evan again, wondering if Sarah had known she was pregnant when she started digging into whatever had scared her so badly. Standing up, Adam brushed the dirt from his knees, the expensive fabric of his suit pants now stained with grass. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cemetery, and a cool evening breeze stirred the flowers at Sarah's grave, scattering a few white petals across the ground. His family's manipulation had cost him more than just a relationship. It had cost him years with his son, and possibly Sarah's life itself. "I promise you," he said firmly, his voice carrying in the quiet cemetery, "I'll find out what happened. No matter what it takes, no matter who tries to stop me, even if it means going against my own family." He placed his hand on top of the headstone, feeling its cold surface beneath his palm. "I owe you that much. I owe Evan that much. And this time, I won't let anyone stand in my way." The weight of his words settled around him like the falling leaves, a solemn oath witnessed only by the silent stones and darkening sky. The truth about Sarah's death was out there, buried beneath years of secrets and lies. Adam knew uncovering it might shake the very foundation of his family's empire, might cost him everything he'd spent his life building, but he no longer cared about protecting the Carlyle name. Some things were worth more than money and status. He understood that now, 6 years too late. The morning sun cast long shadows across the small-town playground as Adam stood awkwardly in his casual clothes, a sight that still felt foreign to him. Evan bounced excitedly beside him, tugging at his sleeve with unbridled enthusiasm. "This is where I do all my best thinking," Evan declared, pointing to a red swing set. "Mom says I get that from Sarah. She used to swing here, too." Adam's throat tightened at the mention of Sarah's name. He watched as Evan scrambled onto the swing, his small legs pumping with determination. "Push me?" Evan asked, looking back with those familiar blue eyes. Adam hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. His hands felt clumsy as he gave the first gentle push. Evan's delighted giggle echoed across the empty playground. "Higher!" Evan called out. "I want to touch the clouds!" As Adam found his rhythm pushing the swing, Evan chatted continuously about his favorite things, his collection of toy cars, the ice cream shop down the street that gave extra sprinkles, and the library where Lisa took him every Saturday. "And this is where I found the biggest caterpillar ever," Evan announced as they walked along a nature trail later that morning. He pointed to a patch of wildflowers. "Mom helped me make a habitat for it in a jar, but we had to let it go, because Sarah always said creatures need to be free." Adam noticed how naturally Evan spoke of both Lisa and Sarah, weaving them into his stories without hesitation or sadness. The boy's resilience touched something deep within him. Their next stop was the local diner where Lisa worked, but this time they were customers. Evan proudly showed Adam his favorite booth, the one with the slightly torn cushion that Lisa always promised to fix someday. "Sarah used to let me have chocolate milk here," Evan confided, as if sharing a precious secret, "but only on special days." Throughout the day, Adam found himself relaxing into Evan's world. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, his observations both funny and surprisingly insightful. When Evan grabbed his hand across the street, Adam felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. At the town's small park, Evan demonstrated his super special cartwheel on the grass, tumbling more than turning, but beaming with pride nonetheless. His fearlessness and joy reminded Adam so much of Sarah that it almost hurt to watch. "Did you know my mom keeps a picture of Sarah in our living room?" Evan asked as they sat on a park bench sharing a packet of cookies. "She says it's so we never forget how to smile big." Adam looked at Evan, really looked at him, and saw Sarah's spirit shining through, in his fearless approach to life, in his easy laughter, and in the way he found wonder in the simplest things. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just about obligation or DNA. This was about honoring Sarah's memory by being there for her son, their son. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting golden light across the park, Evan's endless energy finally started to wane. He leaned against Adam's arm, cookie crumbs on his shirt, and smiled contentedly. "This was the best day," he said simply, his eyes heavy with approaching sleep. Adam felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling, a door opening. Sarah had always tried to show him the beauty in life's simple moments, and here was her son, accomplishing what she never could, teaching him to slow down and appreciate the small joys of life. Lisa's hands trembled as she set 2 coffee mugs on her small kitchen table. The evening light filtered through worn curtains, casting long shadows across Adam's troubled face. "There's something you need to know about Sarah," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I should have told you sooner." Adam leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "What is it?" Sarah was scared, Adam. Not just nervous or worried. She was terrified. Lisa wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, drawing strength from its warmth. "She told me things about your family, about how they would watch her, follow her sometimes." Adam's jaw clenched. "What are you talking about?" "She said your father's associates would show up at her workplace, just standing there, staring. They'd leave without saying a word." Lisa's voice cracked. "She tried to tell you, didn't she?" Adam's mind flashed back to Sarah's increasingly anxious behavior in their final weeks together. He had dismissed her concerns as paranoia, too wrapped up in his own world to truly listen. "Why didn't you come forward after she died?" Adam's voice was tight with anger. "Because I was afraid." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I had Evan to think about. Your family. They have so much power in this town. Sarah tried to stand up to them, and then she was just gone." Adam pushed back from the table, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "You're saying my family had something to do with Sarah's death?" "I'm saying Sarah thought they did, and after what happened to her." Lisa trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The silence in the kitchen grew heavy with unspoken accusations. Adam paced the small space, his mind racing through years of memories, seeing them in a new, horrifying light. "My father," Adam said finally, his voice cold, "he always said Sarah wasn't good enough for our family, that she would bring scandal, shame." His hands clenched into fists. "I need to know the truth." Lisa reached across the table, touching his arm gently. "Be careful, Adam. Charles Carlyle isn't just your father. He's a man who's used to getting his way, no matter the cost." Adam looked down at her hand, then met her worried gaze. "I've spent my whole life trying to please him, trying to be the son he wanted. But if he had anything to do with Sarah's death..." He pulled away, heading for the door. "It's time I faced him." "What about Evan?" Lisa called after him. Adam paused in the doorway. "That's exactly why I have to do this. For Evan. For Sarah. For all of us." Adam sat at his mahogany desk, spreading out the documents Jack Monroe had delivered. His hands shook slightly as he sorted through financial records, bank statements, and corporate filings. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the papers, highlighting numbers that seemed to mock him with their clinical precision. "Shell companies," he muttered, tracing the flow of money with his finger. "All leading back to the family." His eyes caught on a yellowed memo, the handwriting precise but unfamiliar. The words burned into his vision. "Ensure it's handled. No loose ends." The paper felt heavy in his hands, weighted with implications he couldn't ignore. Memories of Sarah flooded back, sharp and painful, her voice trembling as she told him about cars following her home, the way she'd jump at unexpected sounds, how she'd beg him to listen, to understand that something was wrong. He'd dismissed her fears, told her she was being paranoid. "I was such a fool," he whispered, pressing his palms against his eyes. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture he'd been too blind to see. His father's subtle warnings about Sarah, the increasing pressure to end the relationship, the convenient timing of her death. Adam knew confronting Charles directly would be useless. His father would deny everything, wrap himself in plausible deniability like an expensive suit. He needed more. The bar where Victor Grant agreed to meet was everything the Carlisle world wasn't. Dim, smoky, with neon beer signs casting sickly colors across scarred wooden tables. Victor sat hunched in a corner booth, nursing a glass of cheap whiskey. "Mr. Grant," Adam said, sliding into the seat across from him. Victor's weathered face tightened. "Didn't expect to see a Carlisle in a place like this." Adam placed the memo on the table between them. Victor's eyes flickered to it, then away. "Tell me about Sarah Parker," Adam said quietly. "Ancient history," Victor muttered, taking another sip of whiskey. "Not to me, not anymore." Adam leaned forward. "I can make things very difficult for anyone involved in covering up what happened to her." Victor's laugh was bitter. "You threatening me, rich boy? I'm promising you consequences if you don't tell me the truth." The old man studied Adam's face, seeming to weigh his options. Finally, he set down his glass with a heavy thud. "You really want to know the truth?" Victor's voice dropped lower. "Your father might not have gotten his hands dirty, but he knew what was happening. Sarah was in the way. People like her don't survive in your world." The words hit Adam like physical blows. He'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made him feel sick. "Did he order it?" Adam managed to ask. "Didn't have to." Victor's eyes were cold. "That's the beauty of power like his. He just creates the right conditions, makes his wishes known. Other people handle the details." Adam left the bar on unsteady legs, Victor's words echoing in his head. The night air did nothing to clear his thoughts. His father hadn't pulled any triggers or made any direct threats, but his influence had been enough. His casual dismissal of Sarah's worth, his implicit approval of whatever was necessary to protect the family name, it had all led to her death as surely as if he'd planned it himself. Sitting in his car, Adam pulled out his phone and started making notes. He needed more evidence, more witnesses. He had to protect Lisa and Evan from his father's world of casual cruelty and deadly indifference. Adam sat in his dimly lit penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like distant stars. The manila folder Jack had delivered earlier lay unopened on his glass coffee table, casting a long shadow in the fading evening light. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for it. Inside, Sarah's journal entries spilled out, pages filled with her neat, careful handwriting. Adam's throat tightened as he recognized her distinctive way of crossing her T's, the way she dotted her I's with tiny circles. He began to read, his heart growing heavier with each word. "Someone followed me again today," one entry read. "Black car, tinted windows. They're watching everything I do. I'm scared." but I have to protect my baby." Another entry made his hands shake. Charles Carlyle's men came to the diner. They didn't order anything, just sat there staring at me for hours. The message was clear. They want me gone. Adam's eyes burned as he continued reading. The entries grew more desperate, more frightened. Sarah's once steady handwriting became shakier, the words more hurried. Then he found the photograph. Sarah's beautiful face marred by a dark bruise under her eye, tears streaming down her cheeks. On the back, written in her trembling hand, "You were right. It's dangerous." The final letter addressed to him made his heart stop. "Adam, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. Your family, they're not who you think they are. I've discovered something terrible, something that could destroy everything they've built. I have to expose the truth for our baby's sake. I hope someday you'll understand why I had to do this." The date on the entry was the day before her fatal accident. Rage coursed through Adam's veins as the pieces clicked into place. Without thinking, he grabbed the folder and drove through the rain-slicked streets to Lisa's apartment building. His expensive shoes splashed through puddles as he rushed up the stairs. He pounded on Lisa's door, his breathing ragged. When she opened it, her eyes widened at his disheveled appearance. "They killed her," Adam said, his voice breaking. "My family. They murdered Sarah." Lisa's face drained of color as Adam thrust the journal entries and photograph at her. "Look at this. She knew they were following her. She knew they were dangerous, and I didn't listen." "You..." Lisa's voice shook with fury as she read the entries. "You knew she was scared? She came to you for help?" "I dismissed her concerns," Adam admitted, his voice thick with self-loathing. "I told her she was being paranoid." "You were supposed to protect her," Lisa's voice rose. "She trusted you, and you let your family destroy her." Their heated exchange echoed through the apartment until a small voice interrupted them. "What's happening?" They turned to see Evan standing in the hallway, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled and his eyes wide with concern. Lisa immediately rushed to him, her maternal instincts taking over. "Nothing, sweetie. Go back to bed," she said softly, guiding him back to his room. When she returned, her face was set in stone. Without a word, she grabbed the folder from Adam's hands and slammed the door in his face. Adam stood there, rain dripping from his hair and clothes, as the weight of his family's crimes and his own culpability crashed over him. He made a silent vow to expose everything, no matter what it cost him. The mahogany doors of the Carlyle estate creaked open as Adam strode into his father's study. Charles Carlyle sat behind his massive desk, barely looking up from his papers as his son entered. The room smelled of leather and old money, with dark wood panels lining the walls and generations of Carlyle portraits watching from above. "I know what you did to Sarah," Adam said, his voice tight with anger. He slammed Sarah's journal onto the desk, making the crystal decanter rattle. Charles finally looked up, his steel blue eyes cold and unchanging. "Do you now?" He leaned back in his leather chair, looking more annoyed than concerned. "Her journal, her fears, the threats, it all leads back to this family." Adam's hands clenched into fists. "She was carrying my child, and you had her killed." Charles sighed, as if dealing with a petulant child. "Sarah Parker was a problem, a waitress with delusions of grandeur who threatened everything we built." He stood slowly, walking to the window. "But I never ordered her death." "Stop lying!" Adam's voice echoed through the study. "I'm not lying." Charles turned, his expression hardening. "I merely expressed my concerns about her to certain family members. What they chose to do with that information was beyond my control." Adam felt sick. You knew someone would act on your concerns, and you did nothing to stop it. The Carlyle name means something in this city, Charles said, his voice rising. We couldn't allow some coffee-serving nobody to destroy generations of work with her wild accusations. She was carrying your grandson. Adam slammed his hand on the desk. A mistake that has now, unfortunately, come back to haunt us. Charles's lip curled slightly. Though I suppose we could still handle that situation. Adam crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing his father's expensive suit lapels. If you go anywhere near Evan or Lisa, I swear I'll... You'll what? Charles didn't flinch. Destroy your own family? Everything you've benefited from? Adam released him, stepping back in disgust. You're not my family. Not anymore. He moved toward the door, then turned back. I'm going to find out exactly who was involved in Sarah's death, and I'm going to make sure justice is served, even if it means watching this entire empire burn. Don't be dramatic, Adam, Charles called after him. You're a Carlyle. You'll always be a Carlyle. No, Adam said firmly. I'm Evan's father, and I'm going to make sure he never has to fear his own family the way Sarah did. He walked out, leaving Charles Carlyle standing alone in his study, surrounded by the weight of his family's dark legacy. Lisa sat at her small kitchen table, running her fingers over the worn wood grain as she watched the sunrise through her apartment window. The events of the past few weeks played through her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. Adam Carlyle had stormed into their lives, bringing with him both hope and fear. She glanced at the crayon drawings stuck to her refrigerator, Evan's artwork showing stick figures of himself with both her and Adam. Her heart ached at his innocent wishes for a complete family, but experience had taught her harsh lessons about trust. What would you do, Sarah? She whispered to herself, thinking of her sister. The wealthy had always looked down on them, treating their family like disposable pieces in their grand games. She remembered Mr. Peterson, who'd promised her mother a fair settlement after the accident at his factory, only to have his lawyers bury them in paperwork until they gave up. The sound of Evan's cartoons drifted from the living room. Lisa closed her eyes, remembering how excited he'd been after spending just an hour with Adam at the park. His eyes had sparkled as he described how Adam had pushed him on the swings higher and higher. But that was exactly what worried her. Evan was already getting attached. What if Adam lost interest? What if his guilt about Sarah faded? What if his family's influence proved stronger than his newfound desire to be a father? Her phone buzzed. Another text from Adam asking to spend time with Evan this weekend. Lisa picked up the phone, then set it down again. The man had resources, power, connections. He could make their lives very difficult if he wanted to. Yet something in Adam's eyes when he looked at Evan seemed genuine. The way he'd fought to uncover the truth about Sarah showed a determination she hadn't expected. Maybe he really did want to make things right. After several minutes of internal debate, Lisa picked up her phone and typed out a message to Adam. Meet me at the diner after my shift. That evening, Adam arrived early, dressed more casually than usual in jeans and a button-down shirt. Lisa watched him through the diner window as he paced outside, checking his watch repeatedly. He seemed nervous, not at all like the confident businessman who'd first walked into her diner. When her shift ended, Lisa met him outside. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and the buzz of the diner's neon sign. I've been thinking about your request to spend more time with Evan, she began, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. Adam nodded, waiting silently for her to continue. I know you're his father. The DNA test proves that. But being a father means more than biology. Lisa met his eyes steadily. It means being there consistently, not just when it's convenient. It means putting his needs first, always. I understand, Adam said quietly. I want to do right by him. Lisa took a deep breath. Okay, you can spend time with him, but I'll be there too. Every visit, every outing, everything. Relief washed over Adam's face, but Lisa held up her hand to stop him from speaking. But I need you to understand something, she continued, her voice firm and clear. You hurt my son, and you'll never see either of us again. The gleaming halls of the Metropolitan Science Museum echoed with Evan's excited chatter as he pulled Adam from exhibit to exhibit. His small sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, and his blue eyes sparkled with wonder at each new discovery. Look, look! Evan pointed at a massive dinosaur skeleton. That's a T-Rex. Did you know they had teeth as big as bananas? Adam couldn't help but smile, remembering how Sarah used to get just as excited about new discoveries. Is that right? He asked, bending down to Evan's level. What else do you know about dinosaurs? They lived millions of years ago, Evan explained, puffing up his chest with pride. And some of them turned into birds. He flapped his arms like wings, making Adam chuckle. At the interactive exhibits, Evan's enthusiasm was contagious. He pressed every button, turned every crank, and asked endless questions. Adam found himself genuinely engaged, explaining concepts about electricity and magnetism in simple terms that Evan could understand. Can we try the bubble station? Evan asked, bouncing on his toes. Please? They spent nearly an hour at the bubble-making station, with Evan trying to create the biggest bubble possible. When he finally succeeded, his triumphant laugh reminded Adam so much of Sarah that it made his chest tight. Mom would love this place, Evan said as he dipped the wand back into the solution. She always says learning should be fun. From her spot near the museum cafe, Lisa watched them interact. She'd insisted on coming along, not yet ready to let Evan be alone with Adam, but she kept her distance, allowing them space to bond while staying within sight. She noticed how Adam's usual rigid posture had relaxed throughout the day. The way he listened intently to Evan's excited explanations, no matter how simple or repetitive they might be. How he steadied Evan with a gentle hand when the boy nearly tripped in his excitement. When they reached the space exploration section, Evan grabbed Adam's hand without hesitation, pulling him toward a model rocket. Adam's surprised expression softened into a genuine smile as he let himself be led by his son. Can you lift me up? Evan asked, wanting to see inside the cockpit. I can't reach. Adam carefully lifted him, making sure he was secure. What do you see in there, Captain Evan? So many buttons, Evan exclaimed, his face pressed against the clear plastic. I bet it's complicated to fly a rocket. Lisa watched as Adam set Evan down and began explaining how rockets work in simple terms. There was something different about him now, a softness in his expression that hadn't been there before. The cold, calculating businessman was giving way to something warmer, more genuine. When Evan laughed at one of Adam's explanations, the sound echoed through the hall. It was pure joy, the kind of laughter that only children can produce. And there was Adam, smiling right along with him, their hands still clasped together. For the first time since this whole situation began, Lisa felt something shift inside her. The wall of distrust she'd built began to show tiny cracks. Maybe, just maybe, Adam's determination to be part of Evan's life wasn't just about guilt or obligation. Maybe there was hope for something more genuine, something that could truly benefit her son. As she watched them move to the next exhibit, their hands still linked, Lisa allowed herself to consider the possibility that Adam's presence in their lives might not be the disaster she'd feared. The way he looked at Evan, with genuine interest and growing affection, spoke of something real, something that couldn't be faked. Jack Monroe's weathered face was grim as he spread the documents across Adam's mahogany desk. The morning light streaming through the penthouse windows cast long shadows over the damning evidence. "These weren't easy to get," Jack said, his voice gravelly, "but they tell quite a story." He pointed to a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with neat columns of numbers and initials. "This was kept by your family's former accountant. Look at the entries from 6 years ago." Adam leaned forward, his fingers tracing the rows of figures. His breath caught when he saw a series of payments marked VG Special Services in the weeks leading up to Sarah's death. "Victor Grant," Jack explained, sliding over a photograph of a broad-shouldered man with cold eyes. "He's what you might call a problem solver for wealthy families. The kind of guy who makes inconvenient situations disappear." Adam's hands clenched into fists. "And my family hired him?" Jack nodded, pulling out more papers. "These are emails between Victor and someone using an encrypted account. They discuss watching Sarah, keeping tabs on her movements." He paused, choosing his words carefully. The last message was sent the day before she died. The weight of this revelation settled heavy on Adam's shoulders. He thought of Evan's innocent smile, of Sarah's final frightened days. His jaw tightened as he studied Victor's photograph. "I know where to find him," Jack said quietly. "But Adam, this guy is dangerous. He's not someone you want to confront alone." Adam stood, walking to the window. The city stretched out below, oblivious to the dark secrets being uncovered in his penthouse. He thought of Sarah's journal entries, her growing fear, the way she must have felt trapped and alone. "I need to face him," Adam said firmly. "I need to know exactly what happened to Sarah." "Think about Evan," Jack warned. "That boy needs his father alive." Adam turned back to the desk, his expression resolute. "That's exactly why I have to do this. Sarah deserves justice, and Evan deserves to know the truth about what happened to his mother." Jack sighed, reaching into his jacket to pull out a slip of paper. "Victor works out of an office in the old warehouse district. He keeps regular hours, believes it makes him look legitimate." He handed Adam the address. "But I'm warning you, this man has nothing to lose." Adam took the paper, his decision already made. The truth about Sarah's death had been hidden for too long, buried under years of family secrets and blood money. Now that he had a name, a face to connect to her final days, he couldn't walk away. "I'm going to confront him," Adam said, tucking the address into his pocket. "Sarah trusted me once, and I failed her. I won't fail her again." The evening shadows stretched long across the library's weathered brick exterior as Adam Carlyle pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. A single light burned in a window, casting a warm glow that seemed to beckon him forward. His footsteps echoed in the quiet as he entered the building, the smell of old books and wood polish filling his nostrils. Ellen Travers stood waiting by the reference desk, her silver hair neatly pinned back, keen eyes taking his measure. Without a word, she gestured for him to follow her through the maze of shelves to a small study room tucked away in the back. "I've been expecting you," she said, closing the door behind them. The table was already laden with manila folders, their edges worn and yellowed with age. "Your father's been careful, but not careful enough," Ellen began as she opened a folder filled with clippings, handwritten notes, and confidential documents. "When Sarah Parker came to me years ago, she was desperate. She knew someone was after her." Adam's throat tightened as he watched Ellen's practiced hands sort through the papers. The journalist moved with the precision of someone who had spent decades piecing together hidden truths. "Sarah was scared," Ellen continued, her voice softening. "But she was also brave. She wanted to protect more than just herself." She pulled out a sealed envelope, its paper creased but intact. "She left this with me, addressed to her unborn child, your son. Adam took the letter with trembling hands. The paper felt fragile, like it might crumble under the weight of its own secrets. His eyes scanned the typed words, each line revealing Sarah's growing terror and fierce determination to protect their child. "My dearest baby," the letter began, "if you're reading this, I couldn't be there to tell you myself. But you need to know the truth about your family, both sides of it. The Carlyles aren't what they seem." As he read, Ellen quietly laid out more documents, newspaper clippings about suspicious accidents, financial records showing hidden payments, and finally, an anonymous note that had been sent to her shortly after Sarah's death. The note was brief but damning. "Check the Carlyle connection. They made it happen." Adam's hand shook as he set down the letter. The weight of Sarah's words, her fear, her love for their unborn child, it all crashed over him like a wave. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm going public with this," he declared, his voice steady but full of fire. "My father doesn't get to hide anymore." Ellen watched him from her seat, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration, as he gathered the documents and headed for the door. The morning headlines blazed across every major newspaper. Carlyle Empire, implicated in death of young mother. Adam sat at his kitchen counter, coffee growing cold beside him, as he watched the story unfold on multiple news channels. Reporters swarmed outside the Carlyle corporate headquarters, their microphones thrust toward Charles Carlyle as police officers led him through a gauntlet of flashing cameras. The older man's face was stone, his trademark confidence cracking only slightly when the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "This is Channel 5 News, reporting live as Charles Carlyle, CEO of Carlyle Industries, is taken into custody following allegations of criminal conspiracy and involvement in the death of Sarah Parker 6 years ago." Adam's phone buzzed constantly with messages from board members, family friends, and business associates, some expressing shock, others demanding explanations, and many cutting ties completely. The family lawyers had already called twice, warning him about the consequences of his actions. He clicked through his emails, finding termination notices from various company boards and social clubs. His membership at the country club revoked. His position as CEO of the family's charitable foundation suspended. His invitation to his cousin's wedding rescinded. Across town, Lisa stood in her small living room, watching the same news unfold on her modest television set. Evan was at school, allowing her to fully absorb the magnitude of what Adam had done. The news anchor detailed how Adam had provided authorities with recordings, documents, and testimony that exposed years of corporate corruption and criminal activities. Sources say Adam Carlyle's evidence included proof of systematic intimidation, bribery, and connection to organized crime, the anchor continued. The investigation has expanded to include multiple suspicious deaths, including that of Sarah Parker, a young woman connected to the family 6 years ago. Lisa sank onto her worn couch, her hand covering her mouth. She remembered Sarah's fear, the way she'd jump at shadows in the weeks before her death. She thought about how Adam had walked away from everything, his wealth, his position, his family name, to bring the truth to light. The screen showed footage of Adam pushing through reporters, his face set with determination. He looked different from the polished businessman who had first walked into her diner. There was something raw and real about him now. Something that reminded her of Sarah's description of the man she'd fallen in love with, before his family's influence had changed him. "Mr. Carlyle, how do you respond to accusations that you've betrayed your family?" a reporter shouted. Adam paused, turning to face the cameras. "The real betrayal would be staying silent. Sarah Parker deserved justice, and her son deserves to grow up in a world where truth matters more than power." Lisa felt tears welling up in her eyes. She thought of all the times she doubted Adam's intentions, questioned his motives, and kept him at arm's length. Now, watching him sacrifice everything he had to honor Sarah's memory and protect Evan's future, she realized she had misjudged him. The news shifted to coverage of Charles Carlyle being processed at the police station, his empire crumbling around him. Lisa picked up her phone, looking at the last text Adam had sent her. "I'm doing what I should have done years ago. I hope someday you'll understand." For the first time since Sarah's death, Lisa felt the weight of distrust lifting from her shoulders. She looked at the family photo on her wall, her and Evan at the park last summer, and imagined Adam there with them, not as an intruder in their lives, but as someone who had earned his place through actions rather than claims. The evening sun cast long shadows across Lisa's small front porch as Adam stood there, his hand hovering over the doorbell. He had traded his usual tailored suit for jeans and a simple button-down shirt, looking more approachable than ever before. When Lisa opened the door, she found him looking tired and vulnerable, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Lisa glanced over her shoulder to where Evan was engrossed in his cartoons. "5 minutes," she said, stepping outside and closing the door behind her. They sat on the worn wooden steps of the porch. Adam's shoulders slumped as he stared at his hands. "I keep thinking about Sarah," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "About how I failed her. I was so caught up in being the perfect Carlyle heir that I ignored all the warning signs." Lisa wrapped her arms around herself, the evening chill seeping through her thin sweater. "You couldn't have known what your family would do." "But I should have protected her," Adam insisted. "I chose my family's approval over her safety. And now," he paused, swallowing hard, "now I look at Evan, and I see her in his smile, in his curiosity about everything, and I don't deserve any of it." "Adam," Lisa started, but he shook his head. "Please let me finish." He turned to face her, his eyes filled with raw honesty. "I know I have no right to be in Evan's life. My family's actions robbed him of his aunt, the only mother he's known besides you. But despite everything, I want to try. I want to be the father he deserves, even though I don't know how." Lisa watched him carefully, noting how different he seemed from the polished businessman who had first demanded proof of Evan's paternity. This Adam was real, stripped of pretense and privilege. "Every time he looks at me with those trusting eyes," Adam continued, "I feel like a fraud. But I also feel something else, a chance to do better. To be better, not just for him, but for Sarah's memory too." Inside, they could hear Evan's laughter at something on TV. The sound made Adam's voice crack as he added, "I understand if you want me to stay away. I'll respect whatever decision you make." Lisa was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. Finally, she turned to him. "You're right. You don't deserve automatic forgiveness or trust. But Evan deserves a chance to know his father." She took a deep breath. "If you're serious about being in his life, really serious, I'm willing to give you that chance." Adam looked up, hope flickering across his face. "But understand this," Lisa continued firmly. "This isn't about you or me or even Sarah anymore. This is about Evan. Every decision, every action has to be about what's best for him." "I understand," Adam said quietly. "I mean it, Adam. No more family drama, no more secrets. If we do this, we do it right." Adam nodded, relief and gratitude evident in his expression. "For Evan," he agreed. Adam stared at the mounting bills on his desk, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. His decision to expose his family's crimes had cost him more than just his inheritance. It had stripped away the financial security he'd always taken for granted. The modest apartment he now called home was a far cry from his luxurious penthouse, but it was closer to Lisa and Evan's neighborhood. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Evan can't stop talking about the science project you helped him with." A smile tugged at his lips, momentarily pushing aside his worries. The previous weekend, he'd spent hours helping Evan build a model solar system, complete with hand-painted planets and carefully measured orbits. The boy's enthusiasm had been infectious, his blue eyes sparkling with excitement as Adam explained each planet's unique features. The doorbell rang, and Adam opened it to find Evan bouncing on his toes, with Lisa standing behind him. "Dad, Dad, I got an A+ on my project." Evan thrust a paper toward him, beaming with pride. "Mrs. Thompson said it was the best one in class." The word "Dad" still caught Adam off guard every time, sending a warm flutter through his chest. He knelt down to Evan's level, examining the paper with exaggerated interest. "That's amazing, buddy. I knew you could do it." "Can we build another one? Maybe about dinosaurs this time?" Evan asked, his eyes shining with hope. Adam glanced at Lisa, who nodded with a small smile. "Of course we can. But first, how about we celebrate your A+ with some pizza?" As they settled into their usual booth at the local pizzeria, Adam watched Evan chattering excitedly about his day at school. The boy had inherited Sarah's animated way of telling stories, using his hands to emphasize every point. The thought brought a bittersweet ache to Adam's heart. Later that evening, after pizza and ice cream, they returned to Lisa's house for Evan's bedtime routine. Adam had become a regular part of this ritual over the past few weeks. "Can you read me the space book again?" Evan asked, already pulling it from his bookshelf. Adam settled into the small chair beside Evan's bed, the boy snuggling under his rocket ship blanket. As he opened the well-worn book about constellations and distant galaxies, Adam felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. Here, in this simple moment, reading to his son about the wonders of the universe, he found something his wealth and status had never provided: pure, unconditional love. He read slowly, pointing out the illustrations, answering Evan's curious questions about black holes and shooting stars. The boy's eyelids grew heavy, but he fought sleep, not wanting the moment to end. "Just one more page, Dad," Evan murmured sleepily. Adam's voice grew softer as he continued reading, watching as his son finally drifted off to sleep. He carefully closed the book and placed it on the nightstand, taking a moment to smooth Evan's unruly curls away from his forehead. In the soft glow of the nightlight, Adam marveled at how this small bedroom, with its space-themed decorations and scattered toys, had become more precious to him than any corner office or luxury car. The warmth in his chest as he watched his son sleep was worth every sacrifice he'd made. The sleek black car pulled up outside Adam's modest apartment building, looking out of place among the weathered vehicles that lined the street. Marcus Bennett, the Carlyle family's longtime lawyer, stepped out in his $1,000 suit, his leather briefcase gleaming in the morning sun. Adam watched from his window, his jaw clenched. He'd been expecting this visit ever since Charles had made bail. Taking a deep breath, he buzzed Bennett up to his apartment. "Mr. Carlyle," Bennett said smoothly as Adam opened the door. "May I come in?" The apartment's simple furnishing stood in stark contrast to Bennett's polished appearance. Adam gestured to the small kitchen table, the only suitable place for a meeting. "Your father is concerned about your recent activities," Bennett began, placing his briefcase on the table. "The continued investigation into Sarah Parker's death is causing unnecessary strain on the family's reputation." "Unnecessary?" Adam's voice was quiet, but sharp. "A woman died, Bennett." Bennett pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Your father is prepared to be generous. He understands your attachment to your son, but this vendetta needs to end." He slid the envelope across the table. "Inside, you'll find documentation for a trust fund in Evan's name. Very substantial. Enough to ensure his future." Adam didn't touch the envelope. "And the catch?" "Drop the investigation, sign an NDA, return to the family business." Bennett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Or face complete financial ruin. Your father's influence runs deep, Adam. You won't find work in this city, or any other major city, without his approval." Adam stood up slowly, his hands steady despite the anger coursing through him. He picked up the envelope and held it out to Bennett. "Tell my father that Evan deserves more than blood money," he said. "Tell him that I won't let my son grow up thinking that wealth can buy silence, or that power excuses murder." Bennett's smile faded. "Don't be foolish, Adam. Think about your son's future." "I am thinking about his future," Adam replied. "I'm teaching him that doing what's right matters more than money, that standing up to bullies, even wealthy ones, is worth the cost." "Your father won't take this well," Bennett warned, rising from his chair. "My father stopped having a say in my life the moment I learned what he did to Sarah," Adam said firmly. "Now get out." After Bennett left, Adam stood at his window, watching the lawyer's car disappear around the corner. His phone buzzed, a text from Lisa with a photo of Evan proudly showing off his latest art project. The sight of his son's bright smile strengthened his resolve. He might have lost his wealth and status, but he'd gained something far more valuable: the chance to be the kind of father Evan deserved. No amount of money could buy that. The morning sun cast long shadows across Lisa's small front yard as Mrs. Rodriguez from next door walked up the cracked concrete path carrying a steaming casserole dish. Behind her, Mr. Chen from the corner store held bags full of groceries. "Lisa, honey," Mrs. Rodriguez called out, her voice warm with concern. "We saw those reporters hanging around again yesterday. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." Lisa opened the door, her tired eyes brightening at the sight of her neighbors. Evan peeked around her legs, waving enthusiastically at Mr. Chen, who often slipped him candy at the store. "You didn't have to do this," Lisa said, but Mrs. Rodriguez was already pushing past her into the kitchen. "Nonsense," the older woman declared, setting down her casserole. "This neighborhood takes care of its own." Throughout the day, more neighbors stopped by. The Patels brought fresh bread and offered to watch Evan whenever needed. Tom from the auto shop promised to keep an eye out for any suspicious vehicles lurking around. Even grumpy old Mr. Wilson contributed, shooing away a persistent reporter with his garden hose. Adam watched this parade of kindness from his car across the street. He'd come to drop off some paperwork, but found himself transfixed by the scene unfolding before him. Each neighbor brought not just food or supplies, but genuine concern and protection for Lisa and Evan. He thought about Lisa's years here, raising Evan alone while working long hours at the diner. These people had become her support system, filling the gaps left by Sarah's death and his absence. They knew Lisa's schedule, watched Evan after school, and celebrated holidays together. It was a kind of wealth Adam had never known in his privileged upbringing. The sight of Evan helping Mrs. Rodriguez carry a pie inside, giggling at something she said, made Adam's chest tighten. Lisa appeared in the doorway, accepting each gesture of support with grateful humility. She looked exhausted, but stood tall, protecting Evan from the chaos that Adam's family had brought to their doorstep. This was what real family looked like, Adam realized. Not the cold power plays and manipulation of the Carlyle dynasty, but ordinary people showing up for each other in times of need. Lisa had built this life for Evan piece by piece, relationship by relationship. She'd created a home filled with love and support, while Adam had chased empty success in his glass tower. Watching Lisa thank each neighbor personally, Adam made a silent vow. He would match her dedication and sacrifice. He would build something real and lasting for Evan, free from the toxic influence of the Carlisle name. And maybe, just maybe, he could become worthy of being part of this close-knit community that Lisa had cultivated with such care. Jack Monroe sat across from Adam in the dimly lit study, his weathered face grave as he placed a worn envelope on the mahogany desk between them. The paper had yellowed with age, its edges soft and fraying. "Found this in a safety deposit box," Jack said quietly. "Sarah set it up a week before she died. There's more evidence, too. Bank transfers, phone records, all pointing to your father." Adam's hands trembled as he picked up the envelope. Sarah's familiar handwriting spelled out his name in faded blue ink. The sight of it made his chest tighten. "The evidence is solid," Jack continued. "Charles hired people to follow her. There are photographs, surveillance reports. But this letter," he tapped the envelope, "this tells the real story." Adam carefully opened the envelope, unfolding the pages inside. Sarah's words flowed across the paper. "Dear Adam, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I've been trying to stay strong, but I'm scared. Your father's men follow me everywhere. Last week, one of them approached me, told me to think carefully about my future. I know what that means, but I need you to know I don't regret loving you. And our baby, I just found out it's a boy. I dream about him having your determination and maybe my sense of adventure. I want him to grow up brave and kind, far away from the darkness of your family's world. I'm leaving these documents with Lisa. If anything happens to me, she'll make sure our son is safe. I named him Evan. It means young warrior. I hope that one day he'll know his father. The real you, Adam, not the person your family tried to make you become. Please watch over him. Help him become the man I know he can be. Someone who stands up for what's right, who chooses love over power. All my love, Sarah." Adam's vision blurred as tears fell onto the letter. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as Sarah's words washed over him. In his mind, he could see her writing this letter, alone and afraid, yet still thinking of their son's future. "Sarah," he whispered, touching the signature, "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you." Jack quietly stood and moved toward the door, giving Adam privacy with his grief. The letter trembled in Adam's hands as he read it again and again, each word both a knife to his heart and a beacon of purpose. "I'll make it right," he promised to the empty room, to Sarah's memory. "I'll be the father you hoped I'd be. I swear it." Adam stood in the bustling police station, his heart pounding as he handed over the thick manila envelope to Detective Martinez. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she carefully examined the contents. Sarah's letter, surveillance photos, bank records, and Victor Grant's recorded confession. "This is substantial evidence, Mr. Carlisle," Detective Martinez said, her dark eyes scanning the documents. "The letter alone shows premeditation and your father's involvement." Adam nodded, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "There's more. Jack Monroe, my investigator, has traced financial transactions directly linking my father to the men who followed Sarah in the weeks before her death." The detective spread the photos across her desk. Grainy images of Sarah looking frightened, Charles Carlisle meeting with known criminals, bank statements showing suspicious transfers. "We've been building a case against your father for months. This could be what we needed." Within hours, the wheels of justice began turning. Police cars with flashing lights surrounded the Carlyle mansion. News helicopters circled overhead as Charles Carlyle was led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury. The media exploded with headlines. Carlyle Empire, heir exposes family crimes, and business tycoon arrested in cold case murder. Back at Lisa's modest apartment, she and Evan sat on their worn couch, watching the events unfold on their small television. Evan clutched his stuffed dinosaur, eyes wide as he watched his grandfather being taken away. "Why are they taking that man, Mom?" Evan asked, looking up at Lisa with innocent confusion. Lisa pulled him closer, stroking his curly hair. "Sometimes people do bad things, sweetie, and they have to face the consequences." The news anchor's voice filled the room. In a shocking turn of events, Adam Carlyle has been instrumental in bringing these crimes to light. Sources say he provided crucial evidence linking Charles Carlyle to the death of Sarah Parker 7 years ago. The younger Carlyle's actions have effectively dismantled decades of corruption within the family's business empire. The screen showed Adam leaving the police station, his face determined as reporters shouted questions. He looked directly into the camera and spoke clearly. This was about doing what's right, about justice for Sarah Parker and protecting her legacy. Lisa felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched Adam stand tall against the media frenzy. For the first time, she saw him not as the wealthy businessman who had disrupted their lives, but as someone who had sacrificed everything to honor Sarah's memory and protect their son. "Look, Mom," Evan pointed excitedly at the screen. "That's my dad. He's a hero." The news continued to report on the unfolding story. Stock prices plummeting, board members resigning, and longtime family allies distancing themselves from the Carlyle name. But amidst the chaos, Adam's reputation emerged untarnished. His cooperation with authorities and commitment to exposing the truth had transformed him from a suspected accomplice to a key witness for justice. Lisa hugged Evan tighter as they watched the coverage, knowing their lives would never be the same. The news anchor's final words echoed in the quiet room. Adam Carlyle's actions have not only brought closure to a tragic cold case, but have also demonstrated that it's never too late to choose truth over power, justice over privilege. The evening sun cast long shadows through Lisa's modest apartment as Adam helped Evan with his science homework. The kitchen table was covered with colorful drawings of planets and stars, evidence of Evan's growing fascination with space. "And that's why Saturn's rings are made of ice and rocks," Adam explained, pointing to Evan's detailed sketch. The boy's eyes sparkled with excitement as he absorbed every word. "I want to study space when I grow up," Evan declared, adding more glitter to his drawing. "Maybe I can be the first person to live on Mars." Lisa watched from the kitchen counter, where she prepared a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs. A small smile played on her lips as she observed their interaction. The scene before her was something she never thought possible just months ago. "You can be anything you want to be, buddy," Adam said, ruffling Evan's hair. "You've got the brains for it." "Really?" Evan beamed. "Mom, did you hear that? Adam thinks I can be a scientist." Lisa nodded, bringing plates to the table. "I've always known you could do amazing things, sweetie." As they sat down to eat, Evan chattered excitedly about his future plans. "I'll build a big laboratory, and you can both visit me there. We can look at stars together." After dinner, Lisa tucked Evan into bed while Adam cleaned up the kitchen. When she returned, she found him studying Evan's drawings with a thoughtful expression. "He's got real talent," Adam said softly, "and such curiosity about the world." "He gets that from Sarah," Lisa replied, sitting down across from him. "She was always asking questions, always wanting to learn more." A comfortable silence fell between them before Lisa spoke again. "I see how you are with him, Adam. how you encourage his dreams." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm starting to believe you really mean it when you say you want to be part of his life." Adam met her gaze, his expression earnest. "I do mean it, Lisa. More than anything." "Just remember," Lisa said, her voice gentle but firm, "this trust we're building, it's precious and fragile. Don't take it for granted." The grand ballroom of the community center buzzed with excitement as donors, recipients, and supporters gathered for the launch of the Sarah Parker Memorial Scholarship Fund. Banners displaying Sarah's smiling face hung from the walls, her bright eyes seeming to watch over the proceedings with approval. Adam stood at the podium, his hands steady but his heart racing. He had invested most of his remaining fortune into this initiative, determined to create something meaningful from the tragedy of Sarah's death. Sarah Parker believed in the power of dreams, he began, his voice clear and strong. She believed that every mother deserved a chance to build a better future for their children. Today, we honor her memory by making those dreams possible. In the front row, Lisa sat with Evan, both dressed in their Sunday best. Evan fidgeted with his tie, his eyes fixed on Adam with unmistakable pride. Lisa squeezed his hand, fighting back tears as she thought of her sister and how much she would have loved this moment. Adam continued his speech, announcing the first round of scholarship recipients. These 20 women embody the spirit of determination and hope that Sarah represented. Each will receive full tuition support and childcare assistance while pursuing their education. As the recipients took the stage one by one, their stories of struggle and perseverance filled the room. Single mothers working multiple jobs while raising children. Women who'd put their dreams on hold to care for their families. Each one represented a chance at the future Sarah never got to have. When the formal presentations concluded, Adam mingled with the guests, accepting handshakes and congratulations. He felt different now, lighter somehow, as if each scholarship awarded helped lift the weight of guilt he'd carried for so long. Evan tugged at his sleeve, interrupting his conversation with a donor. "Dad, can I show Mrs. Thompson my space drawings? She says her daughter wants to be an astronaut too." The word "Dad" rang out clear and natural, causing conversations nearby to pause. Adam's heart swelled with emotion as he looked down at his son's eager face. It was the first time Evan had called him that in public, and the simple word carried more meaning than any speech he could give. Lisa watched from a few steps away, her eyes soft with understanding. She saw how Adam's face lit up at Evan's words, how his hand automatically reached to rest on their son's shoulder. It wasn't just about the scholarship anymore. It was about family, healing, and new beginnings. "Of course you can show her," Adam replied, his voice slightly husky with emotion. "Let's go find your backpack." As father and son walked away together, their matching smiles visible to everyone in the room, Lisa thought about how far they'd all come. The scholarship fund wasn't just Sarah's legacy. It was proof that something beautiful could grow from even the darkest moments. The evening continued with more conversations and celebrations. But that moment, Evan's proud declaration of Dad and Adam's joy-filled response, remained the highlight of the night. It marked not just the launch of a charitable initiative, but the true beginning of their journey as a family. The spring morning dawned bright and clear as Adam, Lisa, and Evan made their way to Thompson Park. The fresh grass sparkled with dew, and the playground equipment gleamed invitingly in the morning sun. Evan raced ahead toward the swings, his sneakers leaving small prints in the damp earth. "Dad, push me high!" he called out, his voice carrying across the peaceful morning air. Adam's heart swelled at the word Dad. Even after hearing it multiple times now, It still felt like a gift he wasn't sure he deserved. He jogged over to his son, remembering how just months ago he'd been a different person entirely. Cold, distant, focused only on maintaining the Carlyle family's power and prestige. Lisa spread out a checkered blanket under a maple tree, watching father and son together. She could see Sarah in both of them, in Evan's infectious laugh and in the way Adam's eyes crinkled when he smiled, just like Sarah had always said they did when he let his guard down. "Higher, Dad," Evan squealed as Adam pushed the swing. The little boy pumped his legs, reaching for the sky. They spent the morning moving from swings to slides to monkey bars. Adam found himself laughing more than he had in years, his expensive watch forgotten as he helped Evan build sandcastles in the playground sandbox. By afternoon, they settled on the blanket for a picnic lunch. Lisa had packed Evan's favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, cut into dinosaur shapes. As they ate, Adam watched his son point out cloud shapes in the sky, marveling at how this small boy had completely transformed his world. He thought about the man he'd been before, consumed by guilt over Sarah, trapped in his family's web of expectations and deceit. Now, watching Evan chase a butterfly across the grass, while Lisa dozed in the warm sunshine beside him, Adam felt truly free for the first time in his life. The afternoon drifted by in a peaceful haze. They played catch with a soft baseball, fed ducks at the pond, and shared ice cream from the park vendor. Adam found himself storing away each moment like a precious photograph. Evan's chocolate-smeared grin, Lisa's gentle laugh, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees. The sky blazed orange and pink as Evan chased his shadow ahead, laughing. Lisa's warm hand found Adam's as they walked quietly, watching their son weave through the fading light. Adam squeezed her hand, sensing Sarah in the evening breeze. He could almost hear her familiar words. "I knew you had it in you." Silently, he thanked her for her faith, for Evan, and for guiding him to this perfect peace. If you enjoyed the story of Adam Carlyle, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.